Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're embarking on an exploration, well, unlike any other, really, peering behind the curtain of what we perceive as reality. We're going to activate what we call our Codex Umbra lens, essentially. It's a conceptual framework. It lets us examine these claims impartially, just dissecting the narrative without immediate judgment.
Exactly. Just to understand its internal world, its logic, and what it claims the implications are.
We've been given quite a stack of remarkable source material documents from someone named Donald Marshall. They detail his purported experiences at a clandestine cloning center.
And these aren't presented as just, stories or theories.
No, they're presented as eyewitness accounts. Accounts of a hidden subculture involving advanced technologies, global elites, even subterranean entities.
It is a lot to take in.
It really is. But we're here to guide you through every twist and turn of this extraordinary narrative.
Indeed. And what's truly fascinating here is just the sheer scope, the audacity of the claims.
Right.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it challenges really fundamental assumptions about power, about technology, even consciousness itself.
Absolutely.
Marshall's narrative, as laid out in these sources, it isn't just a collection of, let's say, conspiratorial ideas. It's presented as a meticulously detailed account of an alleged hidden world, one operating just beneath the surface of our everyday lives. So our mission today is to unpack this narrative with objective analysis, to meticulously present Marshall's claims as he states them and explore the internal logic and the purported implications of this. Well, this extraordinary reality he describes.
Which brings us to a pretty crucial point, doesn't it?
It does. What if everything you thought you knew about the world was a carefully constructed deception? What if the reality we inhabit is just a thin veil over something much more intricate and disturbing?
Okay, let's try and unpack this then. We're talking about a reality where what happens while you sleep might be far more significant and, frankly, terrifying than any dream you could possibly imagine. So, get ready, because this deep dive promises to shatter some norms and probably leave you questioning your own perception of waking life. All right. Our journey into Marshall's hidden reality really begins with a concept that sounds completely ripped from the pages of a sci-fi thriller.
Straight out of fiction.
Yeah, he calls it REM-driven human cloning. And this isn't just a plot device for him. He insists it's a covert, advanced technology active right now as you listen.
Not just theoretical, but active, widespread even, impacting countless individuals without their knowledge, according to him.
So this brings us to a crucial point. How exactly does Marshall define this process? How does it supposedly work?
According to the sources, it's a very specific form of consciousness transfer, and it happens during a person's rapid eye movement sleep phase, REM sleep.
What people know as the dreaming phase, right? Heightened brain activity.
Exactly. And Marshall sources take that scientific understanding and twist it into something, well, chillingly practical. They claim it's the precise biological window for an involuntary consciousness transfer.
Involuntary. That's key.
Very key. Once an individual reaches REM sleep, usually about, say, 90 to 110 minutes after falling asleep, their consciousness is, quite unwillingly, transferred
from their sleeping body at home
to a duplicate clone body located at one of these secret cloning centers.
He gives details on how they know, doesn't he?
Oh, incredibly precise details. He states that the Illuminati, as he calls them, are alerted when an original person enters REM sleep by a green light. This light is apparently above their duplicate clone at the cloning center.
So it changes from red.
Red for wake yet to green, signaling REM sleep. He even claims that any attempts to transfer consciousness before the person hits REM sleep result in intense, debilitating headaches for the original person.
Wow. Suggesting a real physical link.
A very real physiological connection between the two bodies. It's a mechanism described with chilling efficiency.
So if this consciousness transfer is happening, the next logical question for a lot of people listening might be, where? Where are these operations taking place? He doesn't just talk about cloning in the abstract.
No, he provides alleged specifics about a physical cloning center.
What are those specifics? What does he say about its location, its appearance?
Well, the sources give quite a detailed picture. The primary cloning center he talks about is, maybe surprisingly, located above ground. In Canada.
Canada. Okay.
He places it roughly a 5 to 6 hour drive from the infamous Robert Picton farm.
Okay, that's a disturbing landmark to use.
It is. And its external appearance, he notes, looks like a small sports forum. Kind of nondescript.
But the surroundings?
That's critical. According to him, nothing but grass and trees for as far as the eye can see. Extreme isolation.
Deliberate, presumably.
Presented as absolutely deliberate. To prevent detection and, quite chillingly, he says, to muffle any screams that might come from inside.
And inside, what are the operational details?
Equally stark. Clones, he claims, are stored on stainless steel racks. Sleeping like vampires is the phrase he uses, awaiting activation.
Rows and rows of them.
Rows upon rows of these dormant bodies, just ready to be awakened by a consciousness transfer. And many of the unwilling attendees, including Marshall himself, he says they're not aware of the center's exact geographical location.
Because they only experience it.
As REM-driven clones inside the facility. They're effectively transported there in consciousness, but their physical bodies never leave their homes.
It's a truly chilling picture. You've painted this remote facility, clones stored like vampires.
But for this to have been operational since 1945, as he claims...
Right, that timeline is key.
It suggests a level of technological sophistication just way beyond public knowledge. What kind of timelines and capabilities does he attribute to this hidden science?
Well, you have to consider then that, according to Marshall, human cloning has been a reality for a surprisingly long time. Since 1945, he says, perfected shortly after World War II.
Okay, that's a long time for something like this to stay hidden.
It is. And to put it in perspective, he cites Phil Schneider, the geologist and engineer who reportedly worked on deep underground military bases. I've heard the name, yeah.
Schneider, Marshall notes, claimed that military technology advances at a staggering rate, 44 years for every single year of public technology.
44 years for every 1 year.
That's the claim. So the mathematical implication of this, by 2015, when Marshall was writing heavily, meant that hidden technology was roughly 30, 80 years ahead of publicly known advancements.
If you do the math, 70 years times 44. Wow.
Exactly. And this alleged level of advancement, Marshall argues, makes concepts like consciousness transfer to a substrate body or sleep REM-driven cloning seem less like science fiction.
And more like concealed but very real science.
That's his argument. Furthermore, he details the regenerative technology supposedly used. Duplicate clones, which he describes as fully formed genetic copies of the original person, are grown in large tanks of salty water.
How long does that take?
About 5 months, he says, to develop a fully mature clone body. And he even references, publicly known work like Dr. Stephen Bedilak's research on growing new fingertips in just 4 weeks. He uses that as an example of similar regenerative capabilities, hinting at the hidden potential.
So, like, public science gives us tiny glimpses.
Glimpses into the far more advanced, hidden capabilities Marshall describes. That's the idea presented.
Okay, so once consciousness is transferred and these clones are activated within this secret facility, what actually happens there? Marshall's accounts are, there's no other word for it, horrifying.
They really are.
He depicts them as places of just extreme depravity, a complete contrast to any civilized notion of human interaction. This is where the narrative really dives into some dark territory.
Indeed. The sources describe torture, death spectacles, and sex with children as common occurrences within these centers.
Common.
That's the claim. Marshall explicitly states that Illuminati people actually like watching children die.
Right.
REM-driven clone children, as well as real children who are brought to the cloning centers.
Oh, my God.
And this extends to adults, too, he says, with members allegedly enjoying watching life fade from children's eyes. It sounds like some kind of macabre form of entertainment, a perverse theater of cruelty.
And the details. Does he give specifics?
He does. Quite graphic specifics about torture methods that Marshall himself claims to have endured. He recounts being subjected to excruciating pain as a REM-driven clone. Often, he says, just for the entertainment of others, or as a tool for role-playing by directors and celebrities who participate.
Role-playing?
Yeah, using his clone body for their scenarios. And he warns that continuous REM-driven clone torture can actually cause an aneurysm or a heart attack in the original body.
So the pain isn't just virtual, it's physically linked.
It's directly linked, according to him. The physical pain felt by the clone is tied to the original person's biological well-being back home. The suffering isn't just in the clone body. It has real-world, potentially fatal consequences for the original.
That's terrifying. Does he name people involved in this torture?
He specifically mentions being stabbed repeatedly by Queen Elizabeth II in different clone bodies, describing it as a recurring nightmare scenario.
Queen Elizabeth II.
That's what he claims. He also names Phil Reese, apparently a Canadian Security Intelligence Service doorman, as someone who allegedly smashed Marshall's clone to a pulp with a bat.
Jeez. It's not just torture either, is it?
No. Beyond the torture, Marshall repeatedly mentions REM-driven clone sex with celebrities, and much more disturbingly, the molestation of children in their REM-driven clone bodies.
Children?
Yes. And this, he says, leads to learning disabilities, unexplained depression, and suicidal thoughts in the original real children once they return to their waking lives, suggesting profound and lasting psychological trauma from these nightly abductions.
It's almost unbelievable that people in such high positions of power, individuals we see in the public eye, would not only participate in acts like that,
but also be involved in something as insidious as coercing someone into creating music for them.
Yeah. Marshall talks about how he was forced into creating songs for famous artists, essentially having his creative output stolen and repurposed.
This raises a really important question about the exploitation of talent within this alleged subculture. Marshall claims he was forced to compose many, many songs for various artists while in his REM-driven clone state at the cloning center.
Does he name any songs or artists?
Oh, yes. He specifically recounts having to sing Heartless for Queen Elizabeth II, which is a surreal image in itself.
Wow.
He further states that he made all of Nickelback's songs, even taking credit for naming the band.
All of them. And named them.
That's the claim. He also says he's responsible for Paramore's Decode and all of Maroon 5's songs, including Misery, which he explicitly states is about his time at the cloning center, his struggles there.
Like a hidden message in a pop song.
Exactly. A hidden message embedded in popular culture. And the sources further reveal the immense pressure Marshall supposedly faced to keep quiet about all this.
They tried to silence him.
He frequently mentions being pressured, even begged, by figures like German Chancellor Angela Merkel and Prince Philip, both allegedly appearing as REM-driven clones, to sugarcoat his disclosures.
Sugarcoat, meaning lie or downplay it.
Essentially, yes. Prince Philip allegedly told him the world would end. Governments would be overthrown if the full truth came out, offering Marshall inducements like no more torture, opportunities for REM-driven clone sex with celebrities.
Anything to keep him quiet.
Anything to convince him to stay silent. But the methods of coercion also extended to outright threats and blackmail, according to Marshall.
Blackmail? How?
The Illuminati, he claims, allegedly recorded highlight reels of him, often under MKUltra mind control, doing disgusting things as a drugged, REM-driven clone.
And the plan was?
To use these videos to discredit him when his disclosures gained traction. To basically nullify his credibility, they also, he claims, hold children of other unwilling participants hostage to ensure their silence and continued cooperation.
Hostages.
It paints a truly grim picture of pervasive control through fear and manipulation.
Okay, so who exactly does Marshall say is involved in this whole subculture? He names an astonishing list of public figures, from royalty to pop stars. It paints a picture of a truly pervasive conspiracy.
It really does.
It's not just a few bad apples, according to him. It's a vast, interconnected network, allegedly including some of the most recognizable faces on the planet.
The sources paint a picture of truly widespread involvement, permeating the highest echelons of society. You see the British royal family, Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Philip, Prince Charles, frequently mentioned as central figures.
Especially the Queen.
Queen Elizabeth II, in particular, is depicted as the ringleader, allegedly involved since 1945, engaging in these depraved acts, and even, he claims, orchestrating the murder of Princess Diana and Indigenous children in Canada through REM-driven cloning.
That's a massive accusation.
It is. And beyond royalty, Marshall names high-profile political figures.
Yeah.
United States Presidents Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, German Chancellor Angela Merkel, even Vladimir Putin are all named as attendees at these cloning centers.
Presidents, chancellors.
Yeah. Active participants in this alleged subculture, according to the sources. Obama and Michelle Obama are specifically accused of instigating a sick joke involving a low-level Air Force One flight over NYC, causing widespread panic.
I remember that incident.
That was met, he claims, with their hysterical laughter back at the cloning center.
Wow. And Putin?
Vladimir Putin, in Marshall's account, is described as controlling U.S. presidents, including Obama, effectively making them robots carrying out his will.
Controlling them. Okay. What about celebrities?
The celebrity roster is equally extensive and shocking. Chris Brown, Rihanna, Kanye West, Justin Bieber, Adele, Paramore, Nickelback, Maroon 5, Selena Gomez, Britney Spears, Oprah Winfrey, Jay-Z, Whitney Houston, Hayden Christensen, Natalie Portman. The list goes on.
Just huge names.
Huge names. And Chris Brown and Rihanna's infamous fistfight. He even attributes that to REM-driven cloning, where Rihanna, supposedly under MKUltra, repeatedly stabbed Chris Brown's clone, seeing it as sexy cool.
So even public incidents might have hidden origins, according to this.
That's the implication. That what we see might be a distorted reflection of events happening in this hidden reality.
That's an incredible roster of names, people we see every day in the news, in media. It really begs the question, how does Marshall explain how these high-profile individuals even get involved?
That's a key point.
Or how they might hint at it publicly without anyone realizing the true meaning behind their words or actions?
Well, Marshall suggests that many celebrities essentially sell their soul to the Illuminati. They grant permission for this consciousness transfer in exchange for fame and fortune.
A Faustian bargain.
Exactly. Extraordinary success in exchange for, well, extraordinary subjugation. But, he says, once they're in, leaving is extremely difficult. Whitney Houston and Kanye West are mentioned as examples of people who wanted out but faced severe repercussions.
Stupid trap.
Implying a system designed to entrap. What's really fascinating are the alleged public gimmicks and clues Marshall claims he orchestrated.
Gimmicks, like what?
He states he would deliberately suggest dumb stuff for them to incorporate as gimmicks in their public personas. Things like Kanye West's nerdy sweaters or Chris Brown's bow tie.
Why?
To subtly plant seeds of his experiences, perhaps? Or maybe just to mock them? He also says he inserted subtle hints into songs he composed for them.
Like the ones you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, like Space is Cloning in Nelly Furtado's Say It Right. Or Britney Spears' Mona Lisa lyrics allegedly being changed to She's Been Cloned.
And her music video.
Her Hold It Against Me video, depicting her fighting a clone, is cited as a direct, if veiled, reference to her experiences within the cloning center.
And this soap opera thing.
Perhaps one of the most chilling aspects. Marshall claims that celebrities, politicians, and royalty allegedly read his Facebook posts like a soap opera from the cloning center.
Watching his disclosures unfold.
And calling them front row seats to the end of the world. It suggests this perverse enjoyment of his suffering and a casual disregard for the immense implications of his reminiscence.
So they're not just participating passively. They're actively monitoring his disclosures, reading his accounts, and even, he claims, orchestrating larger world events to serve their agenda.
That's the picture painted.
It sounds like a constant, insidious game of chess played with humanity as the pawns, where public perception is just another piece to be manipulated.
Precisely. Marshall claims, for instance, that the 1982 incident where Michael Fagan broke into Queen Elizabeth II's bedroom wasn't real.
It was staged.
Staged by the Illuminati, he says, to justify more security, demonstrating a willingness to manipulate public perception for their own benefit, turning a security breach into a calculated move.
And 9/11.
More controversially, yes. He attributes the 9/11 joke to Michelle and Barack Obama and states the Pentagon impact wasn't even a plane. He claims these events were used to terrify Americans and create a never-ending war on terrorism.
Okay, that implies a level of control and manipulation that goes far beyond individuals at a cloning center.
It impacts global events, shapes public consciousness on a massive, terrifying scale, according to these claims. It paints a picture of a world where even the most significant historical moments might be carefully manufactured.
All right, if the REM-driven cloning and the alleged involvement of global elites weren't enough to shatter our perception of reality.
Which is already quite a lot.
Exactly. Marshall's disclosures introduce an even more ancient and frankly sinister layer, the Vril reptiles. This takes us deep into the earth, into realms that sound like pure mythology, creatures that seem to come straight from a horror novel, but which Marshall presents as very real.
This brings us to a really crucial point about the true nature of power and potentially hidden species on Earth. According to Marshall, Vril reptiles are subterranean species of troglodytes.
Living underground.
Described as terrestrial aliens, meaning they've always been of this Earth, but they live underneath its surface, right beneath your very feet, as he puts it.
And their role?
They're depicted as the true ruling force behind the Illuminati, demanding worship, encouraging inhumane acts like pedophilia, cannibalism, technological body snatching, and biological body snatching.
So the Illuminati are just intermediaries.
That's the implication. And Marshall details 3 distinct races of these Vril, each with unique, unsettling characteristics.
Okay, let's break this down. What's the first type?
First, we have Vril type 1. These are described as small, usually between 1 to 2.5 feet tall. They have a king, crab-shaped head, diamond scales, eye stalks, and claws.
Okay, quite alien looking.
Very. But their most critical and disturbing feature is a proboscis, a specialized appendage used for biological body snatching.
A proboscis.
Like an insect.
Something like that, yeah. Apparently, they're blinded by sunlight, debilitated by loud sounds, but intriguingly, they can see sound and love music. A unique sensory perception.
See sound.
Wow.
Their distress screams are apparently so unique and piercing, Marshall likens them to the screamapillar from The Simpsons, conveying a sense of alien suffering, a distinct high-pitched shriek. They also supposedly have hexagonal brains.
Hexagonal brains?
A unique biological detail setting them apart. And what's more, Marshall describes this process called autotomy for Vril type 1.
Autotomy, like a lizard dropping its tail.
Similar concept, but much more drastic. Once a Vril type 1 decides to eject its proboscis from its body, it actually kills the main Vril body. It's a one-way transfer, a self-sacrificing act for a new form of existence, essentially.
So the proboscis survives.
The proboscis then instinctively wriggles away, becoming the primary tool for this parasitical takeover of a human host.
Okay, that's type 1. What about type 2?
Secondly, there are the Vril type 2. These creatures share a similar biology to type 1, but are physically stronger, maybe around 3 feet tall. They possess a sheath covering their proboscis, perhaps a more advanced or protected version of the appendage. Yeah. They apparently walk sideways and often wear conical hats, which, according to Marshall, conceal this sheath. This leads them to be frequently mistaken for duendes, mythical goblin-like creatures in folklore.
Duendes, okay.
And in a bizarre incident he recounts, at the cloning center, Prince Charles allegedly tried to convince Marshall that these Vril type 2s were actually Andromedans.
Andromeda, trying to mislead him.
Suggesting an attempt to misdirect or confuse, However, Marshall asserts they are too dumb to invent technology themselves, indicating their power lies elsewhere.
But they can still take over bodies.
Yes, but differently. Their consciousness can supposedly be recorded onto a microchip and then inserted into a human brain. This allows them to body snatch a human and directly control his functions, creating a human host through technological means, not biological like type 3.
Technological versus biological and type 3.
And thirdly, the Vril type 3. These are described as the smartest of the three, but still generally dumb in Marshall's assessment, though maybe intelligence is relative.
Well, what do they look like?
They have big, bulbous eyes, long necks, 3 fingers, 2 toes. They resemble long-necked gray aliens. Specifically, he likens them to the Kaminoan aliens seen in the Star Wars Attack of the Clones.
The Star Wars connection again. Interesting. Any weaknesses?
Surprisingly, yes. Their skulls are apparently weak and can be easily flattened. A curious vulnerability. They breathe an oxygen-methane mix and prefer the deep atmospheric pressure found far beneath the Earth's surface.
Suggesting their true home is deep underground.
Exactly. They possess forearm spikes, which they use to inject debilitating drugs into their prey, incapacitating them.
Forearm spikes?
And they can open their mouths extremely wide to latch onto faces and suck the air out of lungs. A truly terrifying method of predation.
That's horrifying. Do they have other abilities?
They also supposedly influence emotions through empathic blasts via advanced pineal glands, a form of psychic manipulation. Marshall suggests that wearing lead helmets or helmets with specific electrical currents might block these empathic blasts.
Psychic attacks and connections to myths.
Connections are made to cryptids like Mothman and ancient deities such as Quetzalcoatl, suggesting their influence stretches across time and mythology.
So these real creatures are directly involved in controlling humans, especially that type 1 with its horrifying proboscis mechanism. This isn't just manipulation, it's a literal biological takeover.
Absolutely. It's a completely different level of sinister. This is where Marshall's claims get truly dark and biologically invasive. The Vril type 1 proboscis, after detaching from the dying Vril body through autotomy.
The self-sacrificing act.
Yes. That proboscis is the primary tool for what Marshall calls droning, or biological body snatching. He describes a chilling process. It slithers through the eye of the human and then parasitically extinguishes the human being's consciousness.
Through the eye.
Through the eye, replacing it with the Vril consciousness. This creates a human host, or drone. This drone retains some of the original's memories, but is described as dumber, driven by primal and primitive drives, often seeking sexual gratification and torturing humans.
Does he describe how this happens, the ritual?
He explicitly details the ritual for creating these human hosts. An unwilling, restrained human has a Vril type 1 proboscis placed over their eye by Illuminati members or existing human hosts.
Oh, God.
It then slithers behind the eye, spirals around the optical nerves, and secretes parasitic cells to extinguish the human consciousness. A leaked photograph, which was supposedly intentionally released by an Illuminati member, allegedly depicts such a ritual. Observers noted the layout, the positioning of participants, resembled an eye.
Like a symbolic representation?
Potentially. Marshall also warns that some hospitals, with their deep underground connecting tunnels, might be unwitting or even complicit sites for creating these Vril human hosts. Unsuspecting patients becoming victims.
In hospitals, are there physical signs of these hosts?
Physically, yes. These human hosts apparently exhibit specific traits. One eyeball often sticks out further than the other due to swelling around the optical nerve where the proboscis attacked.
Invisible sign.
They might also exhibit symptoms of hyperthyroidism or hypothyroidism and are prone to mental delusions and paranoia, suggesting a deep neurological and physiological impact from this parasitic takeover.
And the Illuminati are allied with these Vril, even feeding them, participating in this bizarre, horrific dynamic.
Yes, it's described as a bizarre and disturbing alliance, a symbiotic relationship built on control and a strange form of sustenance. Vril Type 1 reptiles are fed natural gold by Illuminati members.
Natural gold, not just any gold.
Natural specifically.
Yeah.
This natural gold, Marshall claims, gives the Vril a stupefied high worse than heroin.
A drug for reptiles?
Apparently. And Illuminati members, through consciousness microchips wired somehow to the Vril's brain, allegedly share in this experience, a sort of vicarious addiction.
They get high with the Vril.
But Marshall notes that addiction only occurs in the body where the substance abuse takes place, meaning the Illuminati members in their original bodies aren't addicted, but their consciousness inhabiting the Vril experiences the high. It offers them a way to indulge without the physical consequences.
Wow. That's intricate.
And Queen Elizabeth II is specifically accused again here of stealing German Nazi gold, specifically to feed the Vril, replacing it with manufactured gold, highlighting the lengths this alliance supposedly goes to maintain its grotesque hierarchy and power structure. #Spacia. Mechanisms of control and public deception.
Okay, so beyond the REM-driven cloning and the terrifying Vril reptiles, Marshall details a whole arsenal of technologies and methods, things the Illuminati allegedly use to maintain their absolute control and keep the public completely in the dark.
Right, it's not just the direct actions.
No, this isn't just about secrecy. It seems to be about systematic suppression of truth and manipulation of perception on a global scale.
This brings us to a crucial point. Just how deep does this alleged deception run? Marshall describes various control mechanisms operating on multiple insidious levels, extending far beyond just the cloning centers.
Like what? What are these mechanisms?
Firstly, MKUltra technology. Now, he claims this is far, far more advanced than the declassified 1970s version, which mostly focused on drugs, interrogation.
The stuff people generally know about MKUltra.
Exactly. Modern MKUltra, according to Marshall, involves implantable microchips, specifically in what he calls Mark II clones. These chips allow the Illuminati to decode thoughts, reactions, sensory input, displaying them visually and audibly on large screens at the cloning center.
Reading minds, essentially.
And more. This technology, he explains, programs individuals to carry out tasks against their will, even against their own self-preservation instincts, effectively creating compliant Manchurian candidates who act without true volition.
Okay, that's chilling. What else?
Secondly, there's HAARP technology, the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program. Now, publicly, HAARP is known for atmospheric research.
Right, studying the ionosphere.
But Marshall's claims push it deep into speculative territory. He describes it as a radio transmitting system capable of disrupting human mental processes on a large scale, knocking out global communications, manipulating global weather patterns.
Weather control.
That's the claim. And even interfering with wildlife migration, hurting ecosystems. But most alarmingly, he claims it's capable of time travel once a complete HAARP grid is operational.
Time travel. Seriously.
Seriously. And Marshall issues a stark warning here. He states there's a critical 2 to 5 year deadline from the time of his writings before this grid is completed.
A deadline?
Once operational, he claims, humanity will be slaves forever, with free will gone. Because the Illuminati could always go back to a previous time and correct the mistakes which led to their downfall.
So they could just undo any resistance.
Precisely. This is presented as their ultimate endgame, a way to ensure perpetual control, rendering any resistance futile by simply rewriting history. That's why he sees this as so critical.
Wow. Okay, what's next on the list?
Thirdly, RFID microchips. These, he states, are sand-grain-sized electronic microchips that can be directly embedded into human flesh.
The kind people worry about already.
But he takes it further. They link brains, he says, to satellites and ground-based supercomputers, resulting in total loss of privacy and total control over a person's physical body, their mental and emotional thought processes, even their dreams.
Controlling dreams, too.
That's the claim. These aren't just tracking devices, in his view, but instruments of absolute subjugation, capable of influencing the deepest aspects of a person's being. And Marshall issues a direct, urgent plea to you, the listener, regarding these chips.
What does he say?
He says, quote, "If you have a choice and want to remain a normal human being with privacy, do not have your children implanted, nor yourself implanted with RFID microchip or any other type of implantable microchip. Otherwise, your vision, hearing, sensing thoughts, dreams, and subconscious will be influenced by an outsider who does not have your best interests in mind for the rest of your life." End quote.
That's a pretty direct warning.
Very direct. And finally, Marshall explains the insidious process of drip-feed disclosure and evaluative conditioning.
Drip-feed disclosure.
It's the controlled, gradual release of information, often with lies mixed in, to manage the public's understanding of the truth, preventing people from grasping the complete truth all at once. It's a way to desensitize, to acclimate people slowly.
And evaluative conditioning.
That's used to manipulate public perception by creating positive associations with negative stimuli, or making the public feel powerless towards harmful concepts. The goal, he claims, is to condition people to accept or even embrace things that are detrimental to them.
Making them unwitting participants in their own subjugation.
Exactly.
It sounds like an incredibly sophisticated system of information control, too. They're not just hiding things, they're actively blocking efforts to expose them, even online.
Absolutely. Marshall specifically highlights gatekeeping websites, naming God, like Productions is one example. He claims they instantly delete any information related to him or REM-driven cloning and ban users who try to share it.
So active censorship online.
Demonstrating a concerted effort to silence dissenting narratives and control the flow of information. He also points to the media itself, movies specifically. He states that all the big blockbuster movies are made by the Illuminati, and even some low-budget movies.
Movies? Why?
These films, he alleges, are used not just for entertainment, but to subtly disseminate their agenda or drip-feed concepts into the public consciousness, rather than overtly revealing them.
So even entertainment isn't safe.
According to him, it creates this pervasive, almost inescapable environment of controlled information, where even entertainment serves a sinister purpose, subtly shaping our understanding of reality.
Given this incredibly dark and pervasive system, as described by Donald Marshall, I mean, the cloning, the Vril, the mind control tech, the media manipulation, what does he believe needs to happen?
Right. What's the solution, if any?
What's his call to action for you, the listener, who is now armed with all this unsettling information? It seems like a monumental, almost impossible task to confront such a deeply entrenched and technologically superior force.
Well, Marshall's ultimate purpose, as articulated in his sources, is pretty singular and clear. The dismantling of the Illuminati and the shutdown of the Illuminati's REM-driven cloning subculture. That's his goal.
Dismantle the whole thing.
The whole thing. He expresses a deep desire for vengeance and justice, both for himself and for all the other victims. He aims to free others who are also trapped in this horrific system.
It sounds very personal for him.
Deeply personal. He states unequivocally that he has no interests anymore beyond this mission and does not want fame. His focus is singular, urgent, and driven by a profound sense of injustice.
So how does he propose to achieve this dismantling?
He emphasizes the power of disclosure. He asserts that the Illuminati's only real fear is the populace learning and understanding the truth.
Information is the weapon.
Information is the key. He urges individuals listening to share this information with close friends and family initially, and then share it online. He notes that the Illuminati controls all forms of media except the internet, making the internet a critical battleground.
Safety in numbers.
He believes there is safety in numbers, yes. And that once this information reaches the armed forces, the Illuminati can be brought to their knees, potentially without widespread civilian bloodshed.
Does he offer any proof? Anything concrete?
As a critical piece of potentially verifiable proof, Marshall proposes a direct challenge. He states he is willing to undergo a polygraph test, and he's certain he will pass.
A lie detector test.
Yes. And then, he says he would point to his family members who he claims have privately stated they would admit the truth of REM-driven cloning under such a test, rather than lie further under oath.
So using family testimony under pressure as corroboration?
Exactly. He believes this single act of verifiable proof, his passing the polygraph and their subsequent admission, would be a powerful catalyst. It could potentially shatter the Illuminati's veil of secrecy once and for all.
He also mentioned that deadline related to HAARP, which you described as their ultimate endgame. That sounds incredibly urgent.
It does. It adds a layer of immediate danger to his entire disclosure. It's not just about historical wrongs, but a rapidly approaching, potentially inescapable future.
One that could redefine humanity itself.
Indeed, it's a critical point within his narrative, adding immense urgency to his call for action. Marshall warns again of that 2 to 5 year deadline from the time of his writings until the HAARP grid is completed.
And once it's complete,
once operational, he claims, it would allow mind control over entire populations and even time travel. This, he states, would make humanity slaves forever. Why? Because the Illuminati could always be able to go back to a previous time and correct the mistakes, which led to their downfall.
An unbeatable advantage.
This endgame, this ability to perpetually reset and secure their dominance, is precisely why his disclosure is so heavy and so important, in his words. It extends beyond just REM-driven cloning to the very future of human free will and self-determination. He posits that this window, this chance to act, is closing rapidly.
So considering all of this, I mean, the REM-driven cloning, the Vril reptiles, the global manipulation by the Illuminati, this looming HAARP deadline, what does this all mean for us, for you, listening right now? What is the core vital message Marshall wants to convey?
Marshall frames this entire disclosure really as your only chance to end these monsters. That's the gravity he puts on it. He views his own situation as a kind of God-given mission.
A mission.
And he emphasizes that not acting allows the cloning and abuse of unsuspecting civilians and children to just continue indefinitely, perpetuating a cycle of unimaginable suffering. He explicitly rejects any messiah label that he says the Illuminati tried to attribute to him.
Why would they do that?
He sees it as their attempt to manipulate prophecies for their own gain, maybe to discredit his genuine efforts by making him seem delusional. Instead, he highlights the collective duty to act, driven by conscience.
A collective responsibility.
Yes, to secure a future where advanced technologies actually benefit, rather than enslave mankind. The implication is profound. Inaction, in his view, is essentially complicity in the face of alleged unspeakable crimes against humanity. And that this moment, this window of opportunity presented by his disclosure, is perhaps the last chance to reclaim a truly free future. #outro.
Wow. We've journeyed through a truly, truly unsettling landscape today. To diving deep into Donald Marshall's claims of REM-driven human cloning, the Illuminati's pervasive control, and the terrifying reality of Vril reptiles.
A lot to process.
It really is. It's a narrative that, if you were to accept it as true, would irrevocably alter our understanding of power, of technology, and what it even means to be human. It casts a long, dark shadow over the everyday world we think we inhabit.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it presents a stark choice, doesn't it? To remain unaware, perhaps blissfully ignorant of these alleged realities, or to confront the implications head-on.
Even if they're deeply uncomfortable.
Especially then. The sources consistently emphasize that knowledge, even of the most uncomfortable truths, is the first step towards change. Marshall's accounts demand that we question what we perceive, what we're told, and what might be hidden just out of sight.
Which brings us back to that crucial question.
What kind of world are you truly living in? And what role will you play in shaping its future, knowing that claims like these, however outlandish they may seem, are being made about the very fabric of our reality?
So what does this all mean for you listening? It means the challenge from these sources isn't necessarily just to believe everything wholesale.
No, perhaps not.
But to investigate, to consider what you've heard today, and perhaps, just perhaps, to look at the world around you, and maybe even your own dreams, through a completely different and perhaps, unsettling lens.
What if that line between dream and reality is far more porous, far more manipulated than you ever imagined?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and until next time, stay curious.